Hi and welcome to the NBA show. My name is Morten Jensen and today we'll be taking a look at the Orlando Magic to really gauge what went wrong and where do they go from here. So stay tuned. So it might seem a little bit unfair to criticize the Orlando Magic for having just a poor regular season because at the NBA trade deadline, they pivoted. They decided, you know what, we are trying to rebuild. We are moving away from our main core. And also worth noting is the fact that they lost Jonathan Isaac at the end of last year, so he missed all of this year with the ACL injury. And also just 8 games into the season, they lost Markelle Fultz to also an ACL injury. So really, I am not looking at the Orlando Magic with the mindset of they have failed necessarily. I think that would be extremely harsh and I think it would be unfair. They were the victims of just a whole series of unfortunate events, and that's just not something that you can control. I think they did the right thing, just moving into sort of a rebuilding phase instead. I was waiting on that. Maybe you could argue that they should have done that a couple years ago. I would definitely make that argument, but better late than never, and here we are. That said, we need to get into the numbers just a little bit. So as we can see, not only were they 30th in the league, last in made field goals, they were also dead last in field goal percentage. They were 27th in three-point field goal percentage. They were 28th in assists, 25th in steals, 22nd in blocks, and 29th in points. So what stands out here is a very similar situation as the one we talked about yesterday with the Houston Rockets. They need to have a better offense moving forward. In particularly, they need a playmaker. They need someone who can get the offense going. They haven't really had that. Some people are pinning their hopes on Cole Anthony to hit that up and become that point guard, but you know what? I kind of consider him more of a scoring one. And what I mean by that is he's a guy who can shoot from the outside, he can get into the teeth of the defense, he can make plays, but he is not necessarily one of those natural playmakers, passers, and there's really not a problem in that whatsoever. If you can put the ball in the basket and you can be one of those multifaceted offensive players, you are a positive for your NBA team. That goes without saying. So it doesn't matter that he doesn't rack up 11 assists per game. That said, they will need someone who can come in and take that burden off of them. They need someone who can come in and basically say, you know what, I'm going to get the ball, I'm going to handle the ball 80% of the time, and whenever you guys need a decision, I'm going to be the one that makes it, because so far they don't have anyone on the roster who can really take that spot. Even when Markelle Fultz comes back from injury next season, you know, he's not, again, very similar to Cole Anthony in the sense that he's not a natural facilitator. He's just not, and that's okay because he is supremely athletic. Let's hope he's retained that athleticism. He can get to the basket. He's beginning to show signs as a shooter after going through whatever the hell he went through. I still have no idea what happened with that shoulder. I think that's going to be one of the eternal NBA mysteries. But yeah, definitely he looked a lot better this year, and I think those two guys, Fultz and Anthony, they just need to be looked at as scoring guards who can, yes, help facilitate the offense a little bit, but none of them are really true point guards, true facilitators in that sense. So for the Magic, they probably are looking at a situation where they are prioritizing someone who can just play make, and it doesn't need to be a traditional point guard. If they win the lottery and get someone like Cade Cunningham, who is just a basketball player, he can come in, have his hands on the ball, dictate the offense, and run it. So it's one of those situations where you just need someone. I wouldn't even be shocked if they traded up for someone like Jalen Suggs. Everything remains to be seen. Of course, they already have Anthony and Fultz, and you might be going, why would they get Suggs? That would just be a loaded backcourt. It would, but given the fact that both Fultz, Suggs, and Cole Anthony can also slide up to the 2, you would have a very, very interchangeable backcourt. And yes, someone would have to come off the bench, but that doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, if you have a 3-guard rotation who can slide in between those 2 positions, each and every one of those guys could get 32 minutes per game. Now, of course, I also know there's RJ Hampton there. Maybe you move him up to the 3, and if that's not working out, then yeah, you probably go in a different direction. My point is this though, you need to find someone who can just handle the ball and get the offense going. So for a brief moment, let's just talk about what they lost. I know that's not really looking at the future, it's more of a past, but I think it's important to identify what they lost so we can also identify going forward what they need to restock on. So obviously Nikola Vucevic was their primary guy, 24 plus points per game, 11 plus rebounds. So they need someone who can come in and also hit the glass. They need someone who can facilitate a lot of points. He was also a great passer at the center position. That said, they already found that because Wendell Carter Jr. came back in that trade. He is someone who can pass the basketball. He hasn't really showcased that a whole lot during his NBA tenure, but looking back at Duke, where he played 1 year, he was very solid in that endeavor. He's obviously also a defender, a rebounder, and in time, I wouldn't be shocked if his three-point shot came around as well. I think there's way more offensive potential to Wendell than we really have seen so far. He was always stuck in a situation in Chicago with Jim Boylan, which didn't really work out, and he wasn't really himself with the Bulls, I feel like, after having watched him extensively in college. That he needed a change of scenery, and for him to come to Orlando, clean slate, maybe having the chance to carve out his own role, that should suit him pretty well because he's a guy who can pass from the high post. He's a guy who can pass from outside the three-point line. He just needs to be a little bit more determined, but he could definitely slide into the passing role that Vucevic has as well. I don't think that's a big concern. He's definitely an upgrade defensively. And then, yeah, on the glass, he should be able to also replicate what Vooch did. The big question here is the offense. Can he put 15, 16 points on the table every single night on high efficiency? That remains to be seen, but it's certainly something that the Magic will have to look at moving forward because Wendell is one of those guys that you need to build around. He needs to be a building block, and now the time has come for him to put that on his own shoulders and say, you know what, I need to make more of an effort here. Maybe effort is the wrong word. I need to be more determined. I think that's a much better word because he does put in the effort. I think for him, it's just a matter of being a little bit more selfish. Take the open shot, Wendell. It's right there for you, and I know you can hit it because you've done that in college. You've done it at the high school level. The shot mechanics are fine. That should come around as well. Now, obviously, he's not going to be one of those high-volume three-point shooters as Vooch. He's not going to be one of those very natural post scorers as Vooch either, so he's got a different game. He's working more at the elbow level. He needs to be more of a cleanup guy as well. So that is a sort of change in dynamic that the Magic have to look at moving forward, of course. But he should make a suitable replacement for now. Obviously, his further development is going to dictate just exactly what kind of role he's going to get. They also lost someone like Evan Fournier, who was averaging almost 20 points for him, one of those off-ball shooters. Now, I think that's probably the easiest thing to replace, honestly, and I'm not trying to downplay the importance of Fournier, who was fabulous for them. He was really good. He developed into a much needed and high efficiency scorer for them during his tenure in Orlando. And I don't think you can just look at him going, well, he was just a shooter and that's it. But I will say his role was not necessarily as crucial as that of Vooch or that of Aaron Gordon, who we'll get to in a minute. So you just need to find guys who can come in and get a lot of shots and get the offense flowing. That could be mid-range area, that could be threes, that could be generating free throws. I don't necessarily think it's difficult to replace that. He was also not much of a playmaker. He wasn't a high-volume rebounder either. So that's one position I'm not terribly concerned about moving forward. I think just putting Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, and whoever you get in the draft in those slots, that's fine. You can definitely figure it out from there. That leads us to Aaron Gordon, who of course was traded to the Denver Nuggets. And you know what? Gordon did a whole lot of things that we never really appreciated him for during his Orlando tenure. He was a guy who defensively really flew under the radar a whole lot. He could also handle the basketball. He could shoot a bit. He could drive. He was a multifaceted forward, and there really is no player on the Orlando Magic as we speak who can duplicate what he did just in terms of the all-around skill set. That said, you can make the argument that through all the skills and the raw talent that Aaron Gordon has, he never really put it all the way out in Orlando. This could have been a guy who probably could have averaged over 20 points, grabbed 10 plus rebounds, averaged 5 plus assists. And again, raw box score numbers, they don't really matter, but you get my drift here. I think from a production level, he could have done more. Now he's in Denver, and you're kind of seeing him just conform to being one of those utility players. Don't get me wrong, a utility player is not a bad thing, but he's playing off of Nikola Jokic. I was about to say Vucevic. A lot of Nikolas in the NBA. Obviously Jokic, and he is just finding that role, and he is comfortable in that role. He doesn't need to be one of the primary shot facilitators, creators, whatever. And I think that probably suits him a little bit better. So maybe his role in Orlando was just never meant to be. That said, replacing his talent level, replacing the individual skills that he has, that is going to be an uphill battle, because not many players in the draft, not many players who you can get on the market have that. So maybe that comes in the form of getting multiple players in who collectively can replace those set of skills. That remains to be seen. But I do think he played one of those integral parts of just making the Orlando Magic competitive. So for them, they need to identify guys who can have a similar impact, even if they aren't necessarily big box score hitters. Now, of course, we need to talk about the draft. It's super important for them. They have 2 picks, one coming in from Chicago, presumably. Remember, that pick is top 4 protected, so if the Bulls jump up in the draft, you can only jump up to 1 through 4. So if they jump up, that pick is not going to convey this year. If it stays at around the 8 to 10 area, right now they're in a tie with a couple other teams, so that pick has yet to be determined where it's going to land. Orlando themselves have a pick that's projected to be top 3. That could also move up, it could also move down. So the final seeding there in the draft, that's, pending, of course. That said, they should still be receiving 2 lottery draft picks this year, and that, of course, gives them a lot of ground to look at. That means they can go in a multitude of different directions. They can go guard, they can go wing, they can go big, they can trade up, they can trade down, they can just go with the 2 picks that they have. Loads of possibilities here. I'm not going to stand here and project what they're going to do. All I know is that they have some great flexibility going into this summer because of those 2 lottery draft picks, assuming, of course, Chicago's pick conveys. If we for a moment assume that the 2 draft picks currently projected to go to the Magic, which are slated at number 3 and number 10, stays true, and those are the picks that convey this year, that couldn't have been better. When you pivot into a rebuild and you go straight from that into having 2 top 10 picks in a deep draft, no less, you cannot overemphasize just how important and how crucial that is for the acceleration of your rebuild. If you get 2 top picks in, I mean, you will have immediately 2 guys with a high level of potential that goes on your roster. You can work them out individually. You can develop them individually, I should say. Both of them can get minutes. It should, ultimately speaking, higher your odds of also one of them just booming and becoming a big time player. And if both of them hits, even better, right? Given the fact that they're currently slotted for 3 with their own pick, you should be looking at that and going, you know what? We can get one of Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, Evan Mobley, maybe a Jalen Green. That would be fantastic. I mean, you would immediately get a guy in who probably could be your best player right off the bat. I mean, I'm not even going to say that couldn't happen. Like, it could. When I look at that roster right now, no one really stands out as being the number 1 guy, if you catch my drift. So getting one of those guys in, at least from an offensive perspective, they could be the best offensive producer on the entire team. As for the 10th pick, I'm going to go in a different direction here, because this is not as much a mock draft, but I do want them to think a little bit outside the box. Instead of going with traditional point guards or wings and whatever, I kind of just want them to get production. I think at this point in the rebuild, it's just important that they get production in whatever capacity that is. And a guy like Alperen Şengün, the Turkish center, I realize I just talked up Wendell Carter Jr. He could be a very interesting player to grab at that spot. He can play both the 4 and the 5, so he could theoretically be interchangeable with Wendell. That shouldn't be a problem. He's just a guy who produces a whole ton. I mean, we're talking almost 20 points, 10 rebounds per game, over a block and over a steal per game. He's a guy who can pass the rock. He's sneaky athletic. That three-pointer is also going to come around. He just won Turkey's league MVP. Oh, and he's 18. Yeah, someone who just won league MVP at 18. That's normal, right? I mean, easy. It's ridiculous is what I'm saying. That is just fantastic production. And for a team like the Magic that needs stats, needs production, needs someone who can come in and just put points on the board, grab rebounds for you, get the offense going via your passing, someone who's just involved in every play, I think that's important. Even if he doesn't have the upside of some other wings like a Scotty Barnes or whatever, he can just come in and right off the bat be one of those guys who puts up points, forces defenses to key in on him, and that opens up everything else. Down the line, the Magic might decide, you know what, we'd rather go with Wendell Carter Jr. as opposed to Şengün because they want to have one big. That's also fine. At this point, they just need production. And here's the dirty little secret. If a guy like Şengün comes in and produces at a high level, which he is projected to do because he is just involved in every damn play, he just finds a way to be so, that means trade value, considerable trade value. So if they have to move off of him later on, maybe 2 years into his rookie contract, that's fine. He should have tremendous value and you would still be able to squeeze something else out. So by moving him, you might be able to get another future draft pick. You might even get that and a young player. There are so many possibilities here. For the Magic, it's just so crucial to get these two top 10 picks in because much like a tree, they can just grow and just develop these sorts of branches that leads to very, very interesting possibilities. You just need a start, a running start. And lest we forget, and I haven't really devoted enough time to talk about him, you're also going to be getting back Jonathan Isaac. Isaac, of course, was a DPOY candidate last year. Now, we don't know exactly how he's going to look after the injury. Presumably, it's going to take him maybe half a year, maybe even a full year to really get acclimated to getting back on the court. We don't know. Maybe he hits the court running and he's fine. That remains to be seen. But if he comes back and it's just 80% of what he used to be, that's a huge, huge boost, especially from a defensive perspective. This Magic team, I understand that they were just horrid this year, but look at their situation. Multiple long-term injuries, pivoting into a rebuild. It was just never meant to be this year. And for them to pivot in the way that they did, getting those picks in and having guys coming back from injury, I wouldn't even be shocked to see their rebuild actually get accelerated quite considerably within the first year. Now, of course, I also recognize that where you land in the draft is super important. There is a difference if you land number 1 and number 4. I mean, Cade Cunningham is a generational talent. If you don't get him, of course, you'll have to figure out what else to do. But if you get him, I mean, that's your future right there. So I understand there are subplots to the entire Orlando Magic story that's still being written. That said, this starting point for them, they couldn't have asked for more. So it's now crucial that they get it right. That means it's now time for the Magic to really get this right. Research draft prospect, work them out, get every bit of information that you can to make the most educated guess possible. And just start off next season on a right note. Get guys in who are productive, get guys in who has just oodles of potential, and see where it goes. At the very least, I'm not really concerned about the Magic. It seems they're finally, after a few years of delay, on the right path.